Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. We are happy to have you all join us today for a discussion on technology solutions to scale up corporate renewable energy sourcing in India. And we are also happy to have the Climate Group being our supporting partner for this webinar. The objective of this webinar is to collectively discuss and look at concerted ways in which we can use technology solutions like energy storage and other advanced solutions to scale up corporate renewable energy sourcing. And I'm Survi Singhvi, and I lead our energy related work in India. And I'm also joined by Mariana Heinrich, who is Director Energy at WBCSD, and she leads our global energy work. Couple of housekeeping announcements before we get to the main agenda today. This session is being recorded, and we will ensure that you all receive the recording of the session after the session. All the participants are muted, and we highly encourage you to use the chat function in the main control tab to type in your questions, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can during the webinar. A very important antitrust reminder, while we encourage you to pose your questions to us and get into discussions with our panel, we will request you to avoid any conversation on competitively sensitive topics such as pricing, costs, bid strategies, future capacity additions of companies, customers, and output decisions. Thank you so much for keeping this in mind. A brief introduction about WBCSD for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are a global organization of 200 plus member companies, and we help businesses and work with them to ensure that we accelerate the transition to a more sustainable world. We do this by 6 system transformations that we focus our work on. Circular economy, cities and mobility, climate and energy, which we talk about today, food and nature, people, and redefining value. I highly encourage you to visit our website, wbcsd.org, to get a sense of each of these work streams in detail. Look at what we have planned for today. We will start with setting the context up on what is the need to adopt technology solutions by corporate energy buyers in India, post which we will dive into the panel discussion. And I'm very happy to have a stellar panel of experts with me from Godrej, IKEA, Fluence, Renew, Amplus, Berkeley Energy, CIS, and I'll introduce all of them shortly to you. This will be followed by the question and answer session, for which we've kept around 15 minutes, and then closing remarks from our panelists and from us. Before we dive into setting the context and I hand it over to the Climate Group, I would quickly ask you to visit www.menti.com and use the code 440311. You can go to www.menti.com either through your computers or your phones as you're comfortable. This is mainly to get your perspective about a question that would help us set the context here. And the question is, what are the major drivers behind adoption of energy storage systems by corporate energy buyers in India? If you could rank the options that are in front of you as per your experience, that will be great. We have options like using energy storage as power backup resource, increasing renewable energy sourcing, reducing energy costs, attaining self-sufficiency in generation, or any other that you can think of. We have already started getting some answers in here. Could just wait for another minute. to see where our audience thinks we are on this. It's a very easy tool, everyone. Just go to www.menti.com and use the code on the screen, 440311. Okay, I think as of now, we see the major driver, which is changing as we speak, is mainly around increasing renewable energy sourcing and attaining self-sufficiency in generation. I think we have a close tie amongst all the four options here. I'll just wait half a minute more to get some more responses as people are joining in. Okay, I think the major driver seems to be increasing renewable energy sourcing and attaining self-sufficiency in generation, which is what we would also think about, but the other options are also not far behind. Okay, let's move ahead, and I would now hand this over to Atul Mudaliar, who is the Senior Manager, Energy Transitions at the Climate Group, and he leads India's programs of the Climate Group in helping companies transition to a more sustainable world. Atul, over to you on your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Surbhi. I'm going to check with you if my voice is loud and clear before I continue.
Yes, you're clear, Atul.
Great. Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the Climate Group, it is a pleasure to be a partner to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's interesting that we are talking about this subject today on technology solutions, something that both WBCSD and TCG have been speaking for a while now, but I'm happy that we are talking about this today. Once again, a big warm welcome to all the fellow colleagues, our esteemed speakers and participants. As part of my presentation today, TCG will try to offer an overall feedback of what we have been hearing from RE100 member companies, specifically on technology and allied subjects. And I'm hoping that this will help us build some context for a more compelling discussion, which is coming our way in the latter part of this event. With that, I'll move to slide number 1. Just a quick introduction about the Climate Group for people who are not aware. We are an international not-for-profit organization which work with leading businesses and companies and states and regions globally to reduce emissions, and that's really been the objective, with a purpose to create a prosperous future for all. Globally, we run 3 business-centric campaigns where companies take voluntary pledge on renewable energy, energy productivity, and electric vehicles. Additionally, we are also the secretariat for the Under 2 platform, which is a coalition of around 220 subnational governments. Next slide, please. Great. Subi, I'm not sure if it's just me, but we've not moved to the next slide.
Just a second, Atul.
Yeah. Well, while the slide moves, I can talk about the RE100 campaign a bit more, because I think we'll have a few references about the campaign that the Climate Group runs. A quick snapshot of the RE100 campaign. It was conceived in the year 2014. And today, as on date, we have around 250 companies which have committed to sourcing 100% renewable electricity. And this is on or before the year 2050. All the commitments that companies make are applied to all the operations globally. Next slide, please. So these are the logos of the 250 companies that are on the RE100 platform as of date. Uh, I'm going to switch my connection off. It shows unstable, just for everyone to hear clearly. You'll find companies on this page which are highly diverse, coming from different sectors: manufacturing, information technology, financing space, real estate, and others. Uh, this certainly is a solid testimony of businesses, not only on the RE100 platform, but of course across different climate commitments that companies are taking, as a solid testimony of companies taking lead on ambitious commitments on sustainability and climate action, and causing to drive greater action and influence. One such example is of a recent commitment that has come from one of the largest semiconductor companies in the world, just early part of this week. And the semiconductor company is, of course, the world's largest, with the largest market cap, which has set a target of 100%. Now, what it does, such commitments, is not only has taken the electronics industry in Korea to take notice of it, but it is also pushing supply chains and, importantly, the government to rethink about its laws, which are rather restrictive for market sourcing of RE in the current form. Next slide, please. Great. So moving from a global picture to a local picture and talking about India, uh, the ambition of companies setting higher targets for renewable purchase, as much is evident and apparent in the global context, is also apparent in India. We've got around 40 plus Indian companies which have 100% commitments in India. Uh, this slide is really a testimony of what we have heard in common from most of the companies operating in India, and specifically these 40 companies. Each of these companies have a commitment of getting as much RE as possible in the next decade or so. Each one of them want to play the role of a market player going ahead, and each one of them also want to kind of break the ceiling which are being determined by intrinsic factors, which is limiting their their journey on renewable electricity, and kind of creating superficial thresholds on the amount of adoption that they can do. Some of these factors is something that we'll look in the next slide. Next slide, please. Great. So this is really the feedback that we have heard from most of the companies that we have dealt with here in India. The companies certainly have, as I said, a big ambition of maximizing their RE portfolio to a level that it is economically practical for them. The first choice for companies is certainly to kind of procure electricity from open access, and that has been the preferred choice since until I could say until last 1 year. However, things have changed. Some of the states have flipped back on their policy stipulations, and that has caused some changes in the way the companies are perceiving the way they can do business around RE, and of course enter RE market. So open access really has now is not a preferred choice, although it was one almost a year back. What are companies doing next? They are exploring other captive options, and RE certainly is one of the preferred choice. It is evident that RE, and specifically solar technology, is one of the most simplest things for companies to adopt, because it is really a plug and play kind of a solution, and that really becomes a predominant tech even for companies and choice. Additionally, companies have also at their own levels tested and experimented with small hydro as well as biofuels to balance contracted solar as well as wind. Companies are extremely excited with the new conversation that is happening on round the clock power, and are looking at developers to come up with more innovative solutions which can offer them firm power instead of intermittent power. The question really is what combination of these technologies will emerge as the winner, and how fast can the scaling up happen. Some of the other technical issues that companies have also mentioned, which is constraining their growth of having more RE into their portfolio, is the availability of space, which is, to be specific, the rooftop space that each of the companies have. Importantly, one of the things that have been highlighted by most of the companies that we have also interacted with, not a technology constraint, but really a technical issue, that the demand is really fragmented, small and dispersed. And there are currently no market mechanisms that can support some of the companies to have solutions around that. The other challenge is also of ownership, ownership of the space, specifically here in this case, rooftop. And that also kind of implies that companies do not have the right of choice of making what kind of energy that they want to procure. And this is really the typical tenant and landlord relationship, which companies have been trying to deal with for a long time. We've also heard from heavy industries. There is a huge challenge for them in integrating RE into their portfolio, purely because some of these heavy industries are have very specific processes, and there are criticalities associated with the kind of energy that is needed. Now, with operating with this background, operating in this environment of policy, as well as the different several technical issues that have been laid out, some of which can certainly be addressed by business modeling, such as having innovative landlord-tenant arrangements, virtual PPAs, etc. There is still a role for technology, what we feel, and that is really why we are here. So the broader question is, can technology be the redressal to some of the technical issues and the challenges that we have seen so far? And what's the role of advanced technology in the transition for energy transition for India? So with that, I'll pause and I'll hand it over to the next speaker on the session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Atul. I will now hand this over to Mariana to take this forward and set the context.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, and thank you, Atul. It was great to hear from you this morning. So I think many of you on the line know that we need to have 1.5 aligned ambitions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and at the same time moving to a more sustainable energy system. That is the key thing that WBCSD as an organization, together with others like the Climate Group, have been pushing for 2 years now. What we think becomes more and more important today is that companies don't only have that clear ambition, but they have very clear and detailed implementation plans for the next 5 to 10 years of how they're going to make that ambition a reality. And in India, we really see how Atul has just outlined that companies are struggling to scale up renewable sourcing. The barriers to a higher share of renewable electricity sourcing we are observing is a lack of a consistent policy and regulatory framework, lower adoption of advanced technologies, and we just heard some of them, a lack of access to finance for some players, not all of them, and infrastructural bottlenecks. And of course, there are also individual site-related or company-related constraints for every company who is looking into this topic. Energy storage is one of the key solutions in optimizing the use of existing renewable electricity generation for companies. That is because it helps companies become more self-sufficient, and we've heard that just in the Mentimeter survey that many of you had picked that as one of those reasons. Secondly, because it does mitigate, to a certain extent, the risk of change in state policies on net metering, as consumers can store the surplus of energy and use it later to feed it back to the grid. And thirdly, to mitigate diesel consumption, which is of course still used today in some jurisdictions as a power backup source. The business case for battery storage that we've been observing globally as well as in India is dramatically improving. The average price of lithium-ion battery packs has declined substantially. I think it is now at around 87% in the last 9 years. I think that is 2010 to 2019. And of course, that popularity and price decreases are also based on the spillovers that we're seeing with electric vehicle deployment, because obviously the two industries are using the same technology here. And parallelly, there are other technology advancements in other areas, for example, like flow batteries or some of the technologies that Atul has just mentioned. So the economics are really improving, and we think that growth will continue in similar fashion as it has to solar over the last decade. Now, India is gradually putting in place a conducive policy and regulatory regime to support energy storage installations. For example, we've seen the recent successful SECI tender, 400 megawatts around the clock, that had a tariff of 3.6 Indian rupees per kilowatt hour. That doesn't necessarily translate into a round-the-clock supply of power from renewables, but the first important step in that direction, and an indication that pure solar, pure wind power tenders will become rarer in the future. And in June 2020, India put in place the new intraday electricity market, so allowing the gate closure to move from day ahead to intraday, 1 hour before delivery time. That will dramatically also improve the business case for energy storage or electricity storage in this instance, because companies can at more short notice sell electricity that had been stored at lucrative prices in the intraday market. So all of these drivers are really pushing the market towards more renewables, towards more advanced technologies like energy storage. Now, while that progress has been made, we see that more and more business on the supply side are offering, but we need more, innovative business models to provide energy storage as a service, together coupled with renewable electricity. And on the buy side, we need increased technical know-how on the energy users that help them to evaluate the suitability of scalable technology solutions for their operations, knowing what are they buying, what are the benefits, and what are the risks for their business by doing so. And both of these forces need to develop at the same time to scale up the market and ultimately increase the share of renewables across India. Now, I'm very much looking forward to hearing the views of our panelists on this today. And with that, I will hand it back to Subi. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for setting the context for this discussion today. And we have a very a very good panel with experts on the subject, both from energy buyers side as well as from energy suppliers and technology service providers side. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to introduce this panel to you. We have Ram Vaidyanathan from Godrej Industries, who heads the environmental sustainability team at Godrej Industries and Associate Companies. Godrej is a large conglomerate with businesses in chemicals, consumer products, real estate, and agriculture. And Ram is responsible for driving the group's green strategy and has over 12 years of experience in environment, energy, and water management areas in a variety of roles. Pleasure to have you, Ram, with us. Then we have with us Shashank Adlakha. Shashank heads the new business stream at Renew Power and is a senior vice president. Renew is one of the largest renewable energy IPPs in India, with around 10 gigawatt of assets in the country. Shashank is part of the senior leadership team at Renew Power and is driving the company's expansion into new verticals like floating solar, energy storage, and hybrids. He has over 13 years of experience in the renewables energy sector. We also have with us Rahul Dasari, who is the India Managing Director at Berkeley CIS, which is Commercial and Industrial Solutions. And this is a new company that has been put together by Berkeley Energy and Siemens. And they look at offering various solutions to commercial and industrial consumers in India and in Southeast Asia. He brings along with him vast experience in the sector. Prior to this, he was at Sunshot, where he did a great job of doing the same business for the commercial and industrial consumers. Then we have with us Dheeraj Manhas, who is the sustainability specialist at IKEA India. IKEA is a multinational group and is a global leader in ready-to-assemble future furniture space. At IKEA India, Dheeraj looks at ways to make company operations more sustainable and has over 20 years of experience in research, consulting, implementation experience in sustainability and CSR. We also have with us Rupam Raja. Rupam is Market Director, Fluence India. And Fluence is a leading energy storage technology and service provider globally with around 2.6 gigawatts of projects, both front of the meter and behind the meter. Rupam has an extensive experience in developing a vast portfolio of grid-connected battery storage projects in Southeast Asia, and is supporting the operations and maintenance of the 10 megawatt 1 hour battery storage project that was developed by AES, Mitsubishi, and Tata Power's distribution arm in New Delhi, which is one of the first pilot projects in India on storage. And finally, we have Nimesh with us. Nimesh is the business head of energy storage at Amplus. And he's a member of, Amplus is a member of the Petronas group and serves as its development platform for solar energy projects across Asia and Middle East. And Nimesh heads the energy storage division, where they're looking at how they can work on innovative business models to serve their commercial and industrial customer base. Once again, welcome all of you, and pleasure to have you all with us. And it's great that we have such an extensive panel here with us. Before we get into the discussions directly, I would just go to another Mentimeter question to get people's view on what they think are the major challenges that corporate consumers in India face to adopt energy storage and other technology solutions. So here's the question. Please go to www.menti.com and use the code 440311 to answer the question on what challenges are faced in adoption of technology solutions to scale up renewable energy sourcing. The options are long payback periods, hindering policy and regulatory environment, integrating concerns with existing renewable energy generation plants, lack of low-cost, long-term financing options, and lack of awareness about mature technologies. We have answers coming in. Looks like the audience believes that one of the hindering elements is the policy and regulatory environment, as well as lack of awareness about mature technologies amongst consumers and lack of financing. We'll just wait for half a minute more to get in some more perspectives. Okay, it looks like we have a clear answer there in terms of policy and regulatory environment missing in India. And also some of the important elements are lack of awareness about technology, as well as lack of appropriate financing. Okay, with that, let me go back to my panel and start with Ram and followed by Dheeraj, which represent the energy buyers on the table here. And Ram, to both of you, Ram and Dheeraj, my question would be: you've seen what our audience thinks is the main driver for adoption of energy storage solutions and other solutions, as well as challenges. If you would like to quickly tell us about what you have faced in your experience as the major driver, and what is the major driver? What is that one major driver for you to look at these energy storage technologies? as well as what are the specific challenges that you have faced while you were looking at adopting these technologies. That would give us a very good beginning to this insightful discussion. Over to you, Ram, and then followed by Dheeraj.
Yeah, thank you, Surabhi. I hope I am audible.
You are loud and clear.
Actually, it was very, when the results of the Mentimeter came up, it's almost reconfirming what most of us, I think, would agree with. I don't think there were any major surprises from the results that we saw over there. So just to give a very, very brief background where we are at Godrej in terms of renewable energy is, we had set a very, very conservative target of being at about 30% of our power from renewable sources by 2020. We actually overachieved and sit at about 51, 52% today. And we have made enough investments to be at about 70% by 2025. But as I mentioned in various other discussions, I really, when with Atul, who's here on this panel, and have had many discussions about RE100 and about going 100% renewable. Trust me, nobody would like that more than us or the corporates. I mean, everybody would be very happy to go completely green. But quite frankly, there's a massive leap to be had between going from a 70, 75% to 100% renewable. And I think all the factors that were mentioned here in the Mentimeter have a role to play there. But primarily, yes, it is the regulatory concerns, and I'll be very specific about it. I don't think it's so much the regulations themselves. I think there is a lack of clarity. It's a lack of clarity between what is said at the central level and then what is done by the state level, and there's a lot of confusion. And I think just trying to navigate that itself becomes a bit of a deterrent. From a technology perspective, at least, we've been very successful in terms of converting most of our thermal energy requirements to renewable sources. With electrical, we've made some headway. We've invested in solar, we've invested in wind, some bit of storage, although that is an area in which we really have a lot more to do. And I think this panel and the experts who are here will really give us more insights on that. But the financing model is an interesting one because we view it from two very different perspectives. The cost of financing, of course, is a very, very big challenge in India. It may not be necessarily a problem for some of the bigger companies because they're able to raise finance at a fairly low rate. So CapEx models or investing upfront in energy systems, it may not be much of a challenge. But yes, for some of the MSMEs and the smaller people who don't have the upfront CapEx to invest, I think the OpEx model there makes a lot more sense. And I think if more and more suppliers are willing to provide this sort of PPA model and OpEx model where they're able to sell power, it becomes, it'll be a big driver for the market. Having said that, one of the concerns about real estate is very, very, it's very important because many of manufacturing facilities in India are often on lease. They're not really purchased or owned by the companies. So what happens in the case of the company lease moves or, if a company moves its manufacturing facility somewhere else? So I think that's where I think Atul touched upon this, the very innovative models of power sharing or transfer of these sort of agreements. That really, really has to be very important. The future of renewable energy in India is almost like the internet of energy. There has to be almost a free flowing, multiple producers, multiple consumers, all on a common platform, being able to produce, share, consume electricity at market rates, at the fluctuating market. And that is the future we have to aspire towards. It may not necessarily be in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but I think from a technology and regulatory perspective, that is a direction in which we need to move into, where consumers themselves can become producers. You see in many places, one of the biggest, you had mentioned, one of the challenges also is that, if a company does not have enough rooftop space, for example, to generate renewable power, but some other company may have excess of space. So this is a problem that can be solved through very innovative power sharing models. And this is already, if you see the UK or Australia, where I think some of the most advanced DISCOM models are there in terms of having a common platform and consumers can switch between various producers of renewable power at any given point of time. I think we need to slowly move towards that. But from a technology perspective, there's a huge role to be played in upgrading the transmission and distribution systems in India because we don't have a problem with generation in this country. There's enough and more generation capacity already, and even more in the pipeline, as well as in terms of availability of land and space. And I believe ReNew has set up about floating solar, which is another huge boost to utilizing space for generating power. But we need to look at from a technology perspective how we are going to make sure that most of this power is actually delivered to the last mile. So I think these are some of the challenges that we ourselves have faced. and are continuing to face right now. And I'm really, really looking forward to listening to some of the other panelists here provide some new solutions and new models and how we can really, really make that final leap from that 70, 75% to 100% renewable future. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ram. I think the commitment is clear that you want to increase from 70 to 100%, but you're looking at what new technologies can help you do that. Dheeraj, do you want to add to this in terms of what you have faced?
Yeah, hi. First of all, thanks to WBC and Climate Group for giving this opportunity. We have been already interacting quite a lot in the past, but it's very good to be part of this bigger forum where we have a lot of experts, and probably IKEA is looking forward if we can get some help out of it. So IKEA, we are at very nascent stage where I think on 10th of August, we celebrated our second anniversary of Hyderabad stores. And I think in these 2 years, we have understood that what is our pattern of energy consumption in one of our stores, and looking forward that how can we go for 100% renewable in our upcoming projects. So the main driver for us today is our global commitment, where we would like to go for 100% renewable in our own operations by 2025, and simultaneously becoming energy efficient, and reduce our dependency on fossil fuels by 2030. So meeting those two global requirements, now we are looking forward in India that what will be IKEA's roadmap or to achieve these goals in India, in Indian operations. And assuming that if everything goes right by 2024, all our projects, the 5 projects in India will be operational. So we are gearing ourselves and, trying to prepare ourselves that how can we achieve these goals, depending on what technologies, what policies are available or will be, good for IKEA to implement these goals. And there right now, the challenges we are facing is, of course, it came out in this survey that lack of awareness of the technologies, the tried and tested technologies, where our real estate is very particular about it. We want to look into those technologies because our business is entirely different in terms of retail, and also the mixed use projects where we will be having around 300 to 400 tenants in our buildings. So we would like to look into the continuous supply of electricity, and also the backups, which we are looking into our new projects, and also on-site generations. So we have certain limitations that by putting up solar panels on a rooftop, we are only able to achieve around 12 to 13% of our renewable energy share. But for the rest of one, we have to go outside. So offsite, what are the various options? What will be good for IKEA in the next 5 to 10 years? Thank you.
Okay, great, Dheeraj. Thank you so much. I think I see two clear streams coming out of both our public question as well as our panelists here from energy buyers perspective, that one, there is lack of clarity on what kind of technology solutions are appropriate and suitable for corporate buyers to take up right now. So there's lack of awareness. And the second one is the absence of appropriate policy and regulatory framework that is needed for adoption of these technologies. So let me touch the first one first on technology and go to Rupam, who represents Fluence, who is a leading technology service provider globally. And Rupam, I would like to get your views on what are the kind of technologies that make sense right now. There is lithium ion that is being talked about and is most favored across the globe. But what is your sense from adoption globally in terms of what suits the corporate and industrial consumers the best? And what are the other technologies that the corporate energy buyers can look at adopting in the coming years? Over to you, Rupam.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks, Surbhi. So, yeah, so, I represent Fluence. We are an energy storage company. We are a joint venture of two energy sector companies. One is Siemens and one is AES. So I would say, we would like to say we are technology agnostic. In energy storage, we will adopt what we think is best suited to meet our client needs. So there has to be technical feasibility. And I think the other issue that was raised was it has to be a bankable technology. And then the second thing, and the last thing is that, if there's any sub vendor involved in the whole ecosystem, we want to make sure that the sub vendor, is going to be a going entity, for the foreseeable future. If it's a 20-year investment, then we want pretty much the whole ecosystem to be available to service that asset for that 20-year duration. Right. So I think those are some of the important criteria. I think pricing, of course, is super important. And I guess that comes in with the technical viability as well. So, having evaluated all that, so we've been in this business for over 12 years now, doing energy storage. We have about 2,600 megawatts of battery storage developed or under development. So, and that's a lot of experience, and that across the world. It has taken us many years to get to where we are with lithium ion. It is not something that happened, in the last couple of years. I think it's been going on for maybe a good 10 years. I think there was a Nobel Prize in chemistry that was given for someone who was working in lithium ion in the 1980s. So that's the time it takes for these technologies to, reach a point where they're commercially viable. So at this point, the only viable option we are seeing is lithium ion. There are some interesting technologies, but I don't expect them to be commercially viable or technologically viable or financially, bankable, at least for maybe another 8 to 10 years or so. So, so we can look around all we want, and I think there's a lot of excitement in the technology world. But we got a lot of practitioners on the panel here. I'm not sure what's the percentage of practitioners and businesses, in the audience who are listening in. But if you are running a business and your problem is, how do I integrate more RE in my energy mix? I think the universe of technology options that are available is actually very small. If you want to deploy something that you want to get going right away, something that you can get financed, and something that's technologically going to be predictable, you know exactly what it'll do, and it's something that's going to be safe.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rupam. I think you were pointing at the fact that lithium-ion remains to be the most commercially viable technology as of now, amongst all the technologies that we see. I would actually take this point to Nimesh from Amplus, because we've had some discussions on some alternative technologies that can come to the front to help consumers. So Nimesh, would you just quickly give us a sense of what has been your experience with, you have a few projects that you are already working on with your clients, and I know that until now they have been lithium ion, but you've also done your research on what are the other technologies that can be looked at for adoption. Could you just throw some light on lithium ion versus these other technologies that you would recommend?
Sure. So essentially, Amplus's philosophy has been that we are a solutions company. Essentially, we look at each.
Nimesh, your voice is a little low. Can you just speak a little more
Yeah.
louder?
Is it audible now?
Yeah.
Perfect. So Amplus has always been a solutions company. We look at each and every technology that is out there. We evaluate them, and we understand that technology risk is a very major part of any adoption of any new technology. So we have always worked on a kind of a energy, whatever model that we have worked on, we have taken the technology risk on us. Specifically in energy storage as well, we are coming out as an energy storage as a service model, in which we are not asking upfront capital from the client itself. So that means the technology risk shifts to us. Now, when you're talking about getting to 100% renewable, essentially what you're talking about is two things. A, you want 100% renewably generating assets. So that is one part of it. Now, the second part of it is that renewable assets to a certain level essentially are non-load following, or they do have they don't have the kind of ramp up, ramp down rate that is what the load demands. So essentially, you need to integrate energy storage into any like sort of facility to be able to achieve RE100. That is indisputable, because there is no generating sources which can give you that kind of flexibility and the variability that your load will demand. So essentially, what you require are generating sources, and then you require energy storage. Now, when you're talking about energy storage, essentially, lithium ion right now dominates the market, no doubt about it. So when you are evaluating any battery-based technology, there are essentially 6 parameters. There is energy density, cycle life, cost, charge discharge rate, safety, and then efficiency of conversion process. So these, if you evaluate any technology on these 6 parameters, you will find out, you will be able to compare them. Now there are new technologies that are coming in. Flow actually is an older technology than lithium ion, to be very honest. But point with flow is that, so current flow technologies, they use basically zinc and vanadium as the key material, which have major drawbacks. Like zinc has a short cycle life and vanadium has a very high cost. Flow batteries have, at this point of time, they do have on a larger, if you're looking at a very large period, then if you're looking at about probably 25 years, 30 years, then you will see that flow batteries has an edge over lithium ion. One of the major reasons is because they have low deterioration. But then at the same time, they have low, essentially, round trip efficiency at this point of time. So looking at everything, when you see that lithium ion will continue to dominate the market in the near term. In the long term, obviously, significant new opportunities are there for other emerging battery technologies. Solid state is one that we are following quite rigorously. Now, solid state is fueled essentially by need for more energy density batteries. Now, I don't know how much application we'll see here in India, considering that in stationary usage, energy density to a certain level is a parameter that you are essentially not the primary one, not the primary driver. But then anyone who's basically pursuing lithium ion currently for its safety and temperature characteristics, they will start turning to solid state. So essentially, what I would recommend is that if you are going for any sort of an energy storage project at this point of time, you will see that more than 95% of the cases, lithium ion will make more commercial and technical sense. There are very few use cases in which any other technology might compete with lithium ion.
Okay, so I think both the technology specialists favor the fact that it is lithium ion today, but there are a number of advancements made in flow batteries as well as metal air batteries, solid state batteries, which might bring some more positives over lithium ion going forward, but we don't see this happening in another 5 to 7 years, to say the least. Okay, that's clear. And I think I will now move to the second important factor that people face, which is uptake of energy storage in India by corporate consumers. I'm going to switch off my video as my internet seems a little slow. But I will go to Shashank, you first, in terms of what has been your experience. You have been present in the large scale market now, and you have had the chance to be a part of really good tenders that SECI has issued, both peak power and round the clock. And it looks like it is increasingly making commercial sense at that scale. What would you say would be the case when it comes down to corporate consumers? How far we are to see that this makes commercial sense? And secondly, what are the specific policy and regulatory interventions would you recommend are needed to ensure that the uptake of energy storage is accelerated? Over to you, Shashank.
Right. Thanks, Sudhi. So first of all, thanks for having me on the panel and with such a good and distinguished speakers that you have on the panel today. So really thankful for that. So first and foremost, I would probably like to say that in terms of RE sourcing, so it's not that it's something new. Corporates have been looking at RE in the past as well, and there actually have been enabling policies which have allowed them to kind of go up the curve in terms of sourcing RE. For example, on open access, you've got states like Karnataka, which had a very favorable regime on open access. Other states followed suit. But in the recent, let's say 6 to 9 months or 1 year, these policies have kind of been, if I can use the word, a little bit unstable. A lot of these have been reversed, making it very difficult for corporates to go ahead and still buy RE power as on let's say on an open access mode. The other thing which has happened is that as Ram and Dheeraj have mentioned that a lot of these corporates have, including IKEA and let's say Godrej, have reached 50, 60, 70%, and they want to take that next level up to maybe 80, 90, 100%. They would obviously like to have some more RE in their system, but obviously on a standalone basis, RE doesn't make sense. As Nimish rightly said, RE doesn't follow the load, so probably you'll have to integrate storage. It's a given there. And our experience has been that if you had asked us this question maybe a couple of years back, I would have probably said that, look, it's very expensive, it really doesn't make sense. But today, on a large scale basis, and that's what we have demonstrated in the last 2 tenders, whether it was the RTC tender or the peaking power tender, that using storage today is economical. And I guess over the next couple of years, it will become more so. And my suggestion to corporates, let's say like an IKEA or a Godrej, would be that to seriously evaluate what are the options available. On our part, we are developing various solutions for corporates. Okay, for example, we may have a corporate which is fine, let's say with a 30-35% kind of a CUF, and there's another corporate which might say, no, I want an 80% CUF or a 75% CUF. So we have solutions which we are developing for each of those, and R can be customized for whatever the corporate so desires. And I'm saying this is across states. So it's not that we're keeping a very a 1 or 2 state specific kind of a focus, but I'm generally saying across states. The biggest hurdle right now, okay, for adoption is obviously on the policy and the regulatory framework, which keeps on changing. So if there's one thing which I would personally want is that the policy and the regulatory framework needs to be a lot more stable. It should have a little bit of a long-term vision. Let's say we decide, whatever we decide, good, bad, ugly, but let it be for the next, say, 5 to 7 or say 10 years, so that the market can find its own way around those, work out possible solutions, and then go ahead and implement them. If we keep changing those every year or every 2 years, that really doesn't give anyone any confidence. Financing doesn't come in. People have a limited equity. Everybody goes to the bank for financing, and if we keep changing regulations, the banks also will not end up financing these projects as quickly as they had done it in the past. In terms of technology, I kind of agree with what Nimish said and what Rupam briefly mentioned earlier, is that if you're really looking at the next few years, 3 to 5 years, maybe a slightly bit longer, I guess lithium ion here is here to stay. Maybe you might have some variants within the lithium ion you might end up considering, but largely it's going to be that. And we will really have to see as to how the technology evolution happens with regards to flow batteries or for that matter, hydrogen, etc. How good they really turn out to be, and at what price point would they be coming in at. I think that will be crucial, because if you're selling power to a corporate, price is something which they would be very sensitive to. Notwithstanding the fact that they would want to go up from 70 to 100% of RE, but really it's at what price would they be wanting to go at.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashank, for your thoughts. I think we know that policy remains to be a problem in India. But there are, if I'm just going around to Rahul now to see how is it that BECIS is looking at overcoming the policy hurdles while the policy and regulatory efforts are being made from the government side. What are you offering to your customers through innovative business models or any financing options that you are giving to your customers in terms of so that they can easily adopt energy storage even today? Over to you,
Sure,
Gary.
sure. Thank you, Survi. Thanks all for having me here. So I'll jump right into the topic, Survi. And before talking about the policy or the regulation side, I think uh, I've been in this sector for almost now last 10 to 11 years. First 3-4 years it was wind, then as founder of Sunshot, doing rooftop solar EPC, and now running BCIS in India. In the poll also, when I see it was quite, I mean, I wouldn't say very surprising, but I think the misnomer is that people feel that policy and regulations are the biggest challenge. Unless we don't realize the fact that you have a counterparty called the DISCOM. And whatever we are doing right now, we are just cutting their business from the top, from the bottom, from everywhere. Okay, so this policy challenge is bound to be there. So if IKEA puts a rooftop solar, you're not paying CPDCL. Or if Godrej decides that they want to improve their sustainability numbers and want to go more green, wherever they have their factories, their showrooms, offices, you are hitting the revenues of the DISCOM, and you all are the top paying customers. So say, for example, the most advanced state like Maharashtra, 40% power goes free to farmers. Another 20-30% is subsidized, which goes to lower income group. So we are the balanced set of 30-40% customers through which the DISCOMs just barely stay afloat. So if somebody like a Godrej or an IKEA moves out, the impact not on the top line, but on the bottom line that it has on the DISCOM is, it wreaks havoc. And that's the reason you will see that the left arm of the government says X and the right arm just does the opposite, because it's a question of survivability. So our learning has been that a strategy, a business model where the intervention or dependence on the government is prone to more risk. That's why you would see that with all our experience, now we are only and only focusing on distributed energy solution. That is, you pick a premise, you pick a commercial building, you pick a factory, and you look at the factory holistically. That how do you go about managing their energy, producing the energy there and then, with minimalistic intervention of grid, of the government, of policies, etc. I mean, that's the holy grail. So I think the point is not about how policy will change. That will not change. Let me tell you, that will not change. Your technology has to change. Your approach has to change. That's number one. Number two, I think somehow we all have been very, very focused on the generation side. Can I do solar? Can I do open access solar? Can I do storage? But these all interventions are on the generation side. And when you have excess generation, then you need storage to kind of come in to help you tide over. And first, I'll cover the generation side. So yes, that's a valid point, and that's one way in which big corporates can substantially reduce their costs, number one, and greenhouse gas emissions. Because howsoever good the corporate is, I have never seen the best of the best corporates saying, I'll pay you 1 rupee more because you're giving me green power. You have to be competitive, and that's the reality. That's why the sector is in the kind of stage that it is in. You don't get a premium here for green power. So be competitive for the power that you're giving. You're competing with coal here, despite the fact you're doing renewables. So let's get that also quite straight. So what's happening is that on the generation side, we are again looking at new assets in the form of storage technology, lithium ion, etc., which adds to capex, and there is a commercial angle to it, which everybody is trying to solve. And we know that maybe a solar give and take will be between 3 to 4 rupees. And the moment you add storage, you add another 8 rupees to it, bare minimum. So you are almost at 10, 11 rupees. And at 10, 11 rupees, you have very few segments in the country. Maybe the commercial customers say in Maharashtra, or where you're substituting diesel, where actually you make a commercial sense. So it's not the question of technology there, it's a question of commercial. But I think that the way we are addressing it is, many of the factories, they themselves have ability to store energy. You can use excess energy to store it in the form of compressed air for pneumatics. Many factories work on pneumatics. You can use this excess energy to store chilled water, which you can use in the daytime, okay, or you can use in the peak time, to kind of, discharge. So one is the evaluation that, you have storage opportunities available within the premises. And again, this is extremely customized. What might suit a company A might not suit a company B. So it's a very customized process. So you need a very thorough, what we call a decarbonization audit, which tells you that, how the energy is being generated and consumed. So I think, though we have spoken a lot on the generation side, and we have, what we call the colloquial power purchase agreement, or an energy supply agreement, etc., with respect to electricity. But what we have also realized is that many of the corporates, their major energy consumption is not actually kilowatt hour. It is thermal, it is chilled water, it is steam, it is hot air. So what we're trying to intervene is that can we look at various solutions like biogas-based heating or biomass-based thermal energy to provide steam as a service, the way we are providing electricity as a service. So already a couple of big MNC clients are moving in the direction with us in Southeast Asia. The second part, I think, what I'll come to is on the demand side. So what are we doing right now? We are basically talking to large corporates and trying to tell them that if your cost of power is 8 rupees, I will provide the same power of 40-50% of that power at 4 rupees, and you have a delta saving there. And obviously this power is green. But at the same time, can we look at interventions? Can we look at interventions where the consumption at the corporate side, that is on the demand side, goes down from 100 to 80? Because that 20 units of power that you reduce because of your energy efficiency intervention is almost equivalent to saving 20 units of electricity and the commensurate greenhouse gas emission. So this is the focus that we're having, that one is reducing the cost of power that the corporate is procuring. And the second, can I reduce the kilowatt hour that the corporate is actually using for his overall operation through various technology intervention. And here, the business models that we're bringing in, Surabhi, is that we have very good technology partner, like one of our major investors is Siemens, and they are quite well known with respect to their energy efficiency solutions. We anyway have solar, thermal, biogas-based, etc., multiple technology interventions available on the generating side. And what we're trying to do is that these technologies are not something new. These technologies have been around for almost more than a decade. But the challenge that comes is integrating them. Integrating them so that you don't have excess energy getting wasted, or you are discharging a certain kind of electricity or thermal at the right time slot. So this integration, which we do through what you can call it microgrid, or you can call it IoT controllers, so that becomes critical. So what we're doing is all the technology interventions which are needed, even on the demand side, is something that we are investing in and giving it to the end customer as energy saving, as a service. So here, if you see, the financing element is being taken care of. Awareness of technology know-how is not very critical because the corporate is not investing their own capital. That risk of investing in technology, running it, is completely taken by us. We integrated with multiple sources, both on the generation and on the demand side. And most importantly, I think we are able to conserve the cash of the corporate for the core business, more so in this pandemic and post-pandemic era. And at the same time, conserving their management bandwidth in managing these sources. So as I said, in short, the solution is that go for distributed energy solutions. You have multiple technologies, and you need to have a robust business model there to help corporates reduce their cost, their emissions, and sustainability targets, both by having intervention on the generation side and on the demand side. I think that's the only way people will go beyond 60, 70%. I mean, I might look like a pessimist here, but frankly, 100% looks quite tough looking at the current reality that we're looking at. But even if I think corporates do 60, 70, 80%, I think that's a huge number. That's a huge number. So let's first aim at that, because you cannot not have the grid, because they give you that energy security at the end of the day. Even if you have diesel generator, you have the grid. So that's my view.
Got it. I think what you're saying is, even with the existing policy and regulatory regime, if you adopt some innovative business models, like you are offering energy as a service, heat as a service, that could help companies go beyond 70 to 80%. And then if we have the right policy support, we can very well go to 100%. We've had some questions on policy, but I think most of them are covered. I would like to bring one of those up here in terms of looking at how, like when you are providing, like Rahul spoke, when you're providing energy as a service, you are looking at probably catering to a group of consumers together, and also helping within the group, also helping each one of them trade that service amongst each other. I would like to go to the entire panel and see if you, whoever wants to answer this question, on how is it that we can ensure, given that there are limited applications in India that energy storage and other technologies can be put to use to, and how can we ensure that we club consumers so that the applications that are that energy storage is put to is maximized and value stacking is something that the system can benefit from. So what is needed what kind of policies are needed to ensure that we group the consumers together? Ram, I see you would like to answer this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the answer for what is the solution for doing this, but I do know this sort of model it's not brand new. It's been done in other countries. So the idea of how to do this is there. How to fit it for the local conditions and the local tariffs and understanding the willingness to pay of various customers. That is the real important question. The skeleton is already ready. We know how to do this, and I'm willing to be corrected by any of the technology experts here. The technology for integration and management is already there. It's not really that difficult to manage microgrids which have multiple inputs and multiple withdrawals. So that's not really difficult. The challenge is actually from a regulatory and tariff perspective. What is the rate of power that will be fixed over there? How much is going to be apportioned to each off-taker? Is there going to be caps on this? Are there going to be incentives for people who, like how Rahul said, there should be some sort of incentive for people who are more efficient in their energy usage. So it is these rules and regulations around these microgrids that are really have to be defined. The technology for it is already there. There are controllers available which can handle up to 6-7 different kinds of inputs and manage, and they can be programmed for time of day tariff. They can be programmed with real time for every few seconds, understanding the cheapest source of power at any given point of time and switch to that. And switching between various sources is almost seamless, just without any major fluctuations. Integrating even your backup, your DG or your other forms of storage are already existing people, and you already made the sunk cost. Your investment is there. Nobody's telling you to forego that. That can be a part of this integrated system, but it's the rules around this. How do we set the algorithm for the rules around which is a really critical thing?
I think I'll just add to Ram there. So it'll be a very, very valid point. I mean, I don't know how many of, you are aware, almost 5-6 years back in Gurgaon, when DLF was setting up the entire ecosystem, they had similar kind of a plan, not because they wanted to say, reduce the cost of power, because the quality of power was so intermittent. So you had, gas-based generators, which were supplying power to various entities, and they got into huge regulatory issues, with the DISCOM. So yes, first is as a policy, as a regulation, generation and consumption happening at multiple sources, and that getting accounted for with the required banking, wheeling charges, transmission charges, etc. So the point is, it's not like it cannot be done. It can absolutely be done. And I mean, though in Europe and all, you'll listen about blockchain and all that. I think that's too far away. First, let's look at how, we are just doing basic accounting. I think that the challenge there is that is basically grid reforms and modernization. I mean, state after state, you have an entity called the State Load Dispatch Center, which on a real-time basis basically matches the generation with the demand. And it's unfortunate, but the fact is most of the SLDCs in the country at a given time of T equal to T1 won't even know that what exactly is my load and what exactly, is my generation. That mapping or that matching itself, does not happen. So I think if we have multiple generation points as well, which happens in, on-site power or distributed solution, it just makes it too complex. So first is, I think the entire distribution infrastructure needs to be digitized, needs to be revamped, so that on a real-time basis, you're able to track this consumption of power or export of power. And I personally feel that it can happen with, dense areas. So especially cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Calcutta, where the DISCOMs are getting privatized, where efficiencies is, kind of coming in. So for example, before Bombay got privatized, your losses were upwards. It was in the double digit. And that was a low-hanging fruit that Tata and Torrent and now Adani have come and completely knocked off. So I think one is definitely on the policy side, which, the bureaucrats very well know how to go about doing it. But before that, what's most important is grid modernization, grid digitization, because unless you have the data, there's no way that you'll be able to do this set off at hundreds and thousands of points in a real time.
Right, that's a very valid point. Grid modernization and digitization are both very important when we're looking at distributed energy sources and power coming from different sources combined with storage. I'm a little mindful of the time. We just have 4 minutes left. Is there anything anything important that any of the panelists would like to talk about as closing remark in just a minute or two? No?
So I would essentially want to add to the discussion we were just having. So when you're saying that you would want to have value stacking being done on energy storage specifically, not other technologies, is something that I try to be specific here. So again, as Rahul and Ram pointed out, it's not a technology issue, though there's a certain amount of grid modernization that needs to happen. But in the end, it is a policy issue. Let's just say, for instance, an industrial area that would want to go, has about 10 or 15 industries, and they would want to set up a common energy storage for all those 15 industries. And that energy storage can be used for different use cases for different industry. The settlement mechanism, bringing all of them together is easy if the regulation permits it. Right now, I don't think so the regulation is letting you do it. So that is one of the major concerns. So where there is a will, there is a way. In terms of now why it is required because again, it was earlier said by, again, I think so Ram itself, that our overall generation capacity is quite huge. It's standing at about, right now, I think so the last number was about 367 gigawatt. Our peak was, I think, about 182, 183. That is what was required. And we were able to fulfill about 182.5 gigawatt in that. So approximately like a less than one, we were short by about 1 gigawatt. Now, the point is that we are increasing our peak every year. Every year, we are increasing it by 7 to 10 gigawatts. And what we are doing is we are adding more capacity to it. But those, what is happening is already the plant load factor of the original assets are going down. It's last year it was 61%. This year it is 56.4 for overall on a thermal level. So essentially, energy storage.
If you could just wrap up in another half a minute, Ramesh.
Sure. So energy storage is what is the way forward. And what I would say is there's a certain amount of regulation if they can flex and let sub circles to have common energy storage. I think so that can result in a significant benefit for the grid. They can save cost. Industries can have benefit. So there is definitely merit in the idea of a group energy storage for a couple of industries.
Got it. Great. I think we've had a great discussion and we're close to closing this. I would just hand over to Mariana for a quick closing remark on our discussions. Mariana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Surabhi. My closing remarks are to thank the speakers very much to join us today, and particularly also, of course, everybody who joined us online. And my special thanks goes to you, Surabhi, for organizing this amazing webinar, finding those excellent speakers and guiding us through today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariana. I would just quickly talk about the next step going forward from this. We have a ReScale project in India under which we have a corporate PPA forum. And we do plan to extend that forum to include technology service providers, energy suppliers, as well as more energy buyers, who are interested in increasing their RE uptake through energy storage. So I very much welcome everyone to be a part of that forum. From the participants as well, if there is anyone relevant who would want to be a part of this forum, please write to us and we'll be happy to take this forward. And this doesn't end here. We are looking at going to the next level in terms of how we can make the use of energy storage more easily adoptable by consumers. Thank you so much for all. Thank you so much to all for being with us. It was great having all of you panelists and the participants. We look forward to hearing from you more on how we can accelerate this journey. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye.